professionals, and citizens concerned about intellectual and developmental disabilities since 1984. Participants can submit questions through the chat box on the webinar console anytime during the presentation, and we're going to have a short question and answer session at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded to share with others who weren't able to attend live today, and your telephones and microphones have been muted for this call. The recording of today's webinar will be posted by the end of this week on the OTAC website.
My name is Stephanie Hunter. I'm part of OTAC's behavior support team that provides training and technical assistance throughout Oregon. We're glad you're able to join us today, and now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Dan Baker, for those of you new joining us. Dan Baker, PhD, is Director of Community Positive Behavior Support, Transition, and Supported Employment Projects, and Associate Professor of Pediatrics at the Boggs Center on Developmental Disabilities. Dr. Baker's focus at the Boggs Center is on positive behavior support, models of community and educational support, transition services, and mental health services for persons with disabilities. Dr. Baker earned his PhD in educational psychology in 1992 and a teaching license in 1990 from the University of Minnesota. He has worked with people with a range of disabilities. His applied work includes efforts in schools, residential settings for people with disabilities, recreational programs, and employment supports. Dr. Baker also has his roots in Oregon. He previously taught at the University of Oregon from 1993 to 2003 and worked at Oregon Rehabilitation Association. Dr. Baker is well published in both edited books and literary journals. Most of his published work addresses strategies for teaching direct care staff to work with persons who present challenges. His contributions earned him the 2010 Clinical Practice Award from NADD, an international professional association dedicated to advancing mental wellness for persons with intellectual or developmental disabilities. Thank you all so much for being with us, and before I turn it over to our presenter, we are going to do a quick poll to see who's here in the audience with us today.
So I see that 66% of our participants have already made their selection. We'll keep this poll open just a little bit longer to give everybody a chance. And I'll be closing this polls now so we can take a look at our results. And we seem to be looking at 32% behavior specialist, consultant, 39% provider organization employee, 5% mental health professional, 25% state county brokerage or CDDP employee, and 18% in the other category, family guardian, medical professional, etc. So now we'd like to hand it over to our super speaker, Daniel Baker.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. If you were on the webinar that just completed, you will note that over the course of the next hour, I will become increasingly hoarse because it's allergy season out here. I'm sure it is there as well. Good. So this section of the webinar is entitled Sunny Side Up. Wellness approaches for behavior intervention for people with IDD. You do see at the bottom of this slide, you have my email address. Should you have any questions that come up after our question and answer session at the end of this webinar, I do encourage you to send them to me via email, and also please send me any pretty pictures you have of Oregon, because Oregon is such a pretty place and I miss it. So, good. Let's get going here and talk about wellness approaches to behavior intervention. Whoops, it always happens. So, what is wellness? Wellness is the condition of good physical and mental health, especially when maintained by proper diet, exercise, and habits. I like us to include wellness as one of our overarching goals in support for people with disabilities. I think this is something that all of us are concerned about in our own lives, and it should be equally a concern for the people we support. When we think about how we array supports for individuals, I ask us, do we suffer from illness or do we enjoy wellness? Do we focus on what's wrong or do we focus on what's strong? What does wellness include? It includes a number of different areas. First up, it includes healthy mind with a focus on positive emotion, a focus on use of your mind, and a focus on attribution. Why do things happen in my life? Why does a traffic jam occur? Why does some bucket end up in front of me when I'm walking? I used to be the supervisor for a 5-person cleaning crew. And one of the people on my cleaning crew would always be walking into stuff. And whenever he walked into anything, would say, "That's it, I knew it, God hates me." His vision of the world was that there was somebody who was deliberately messing with him nonstop. That's not a happy person. And when we think of wellness, I like to think of this quote. You could say that I came up with it, or you could say Karen Baker came up with it. We actually give credit to each other for it because we have the same last name. But happy people don't act out. Happy people don't spend a lot of time trying to make other people unhappy. So when we think about wellness, we include a healthy mind. We also include healthy body, fitness, which for people with disabilities I define as the ability to do what you need to and want to do. And then third up, a focus on healthy lifestyle, things to do, meaningful work, and relationships in your life. When I look at the lives of people who have severe major problem behaviors, I see people who have almost none of these wellness factors in their lives. And I don't want to get caught up in whether it's a chicken or the egg. Do they have less going on because they're acting out a lot, or do they have a lot of acting out because they don't have these good things going on? It's not a chicken or the egg, it's both. We address the problem behavior, but we also address the factors in this person's life that are not working for them. So I really like to look at all of these different things when I start working with somebody who's got really severe problem behaviors and a lot of bad stuff going on. I also was raised by my grandma for a few years of my childhood. Idle hands are the devil's workshop. Idle hands are the devil's work tools. Idle hands are the, however you like to put it, whether it's demonic or not. But when people don't have stuff to do, they find their own stuff to do. Cinnamon challenge anybody? And if we were able to stream video off of this webinar platform, I would show you this horrible video of kids lying beneath moving trains. And go find it on YouTube. It's appalling. But when people don't have stuff to do, they find things to do, whether it's lying beneath moving trains, whether it's the Cinnamon Challenge, or whether it is seriously messing with your family or your support staff because you don't have other more entertaining things to do. Now, how does this relate to problem behavior? Number one, we mentioned earlier, happy people do not have as many problem behaviors. People who have meaningful lives aren't going to see the same level of entertainment by messing with other people. What does it have to do with problem behavior? Number two, people with a lot of problem behaviors don't have good stuff going on in their lives. We mentioned that earlier. But number 3, stress is a major cause of problem behavior. And when people do not have the ability to manage their stress, and when people do not have the ability to predict stressful events in their lives, and when people have a lot of stressful events in their lives, what happens? That causes some form of problem behavior because you are so frustrated. So let's tie this back to positive behavior support. People are people. Whether you have a disability or not, we're all people. And one of the mistakes I think that is made in this field is that we treat people with disabilities like they are somehow different. We have different kinds of problem behaviors. We have different kinds of behavior plans. We have different sorts of intervention and support. And to me, that's a mistake, because whether or not you have a disability, we all have the same type of problems. We have the same type of challenges, and we have the same ways we cope with the world. We also know that problem behaviors are the #1 source of trouble. Why do people with disabilities get fired from community jobs? Classic study on that, published in the Journal of Voc Rehab, showed that over 70% of job loss was not because people with disabilities couldn't do the job. It was because of problem behaviors. More recent study done in the state of South Carolina, focusing just on people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, 84% of job loss due to problem behavior. When people are no longer able to be supported in their family homes, overwhelmingly the reason is because families have trouble managing behavior. Why are people asked to leave Jersey jump, an inflatable bounce place? Same thing. Group homes no longer able to support people. Problem behavior. And we need to take a thorough, comprehensive look at how we address problem behavior and think about how we all manage problems in our lives. So I'm going to give you a stressful situation. And I know this is a little bit tough to do in a webinar as opposed to in a traditional workshop where I'd be in front of you, but I'm going to give you a tough situation. You get a request from your supervisor, but you don't quite understand what the request was. Then your supervisor zooms off after making that request. I would like you personally now to take about 30 seconds and think, what are the good things to do? What are the bad things to do? And then what skills do you need to do good things instead of bad things? For once in my life, I'm actually going to be quiet for a moment. And play do 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 do. Okay. We all agree this is a stressful situation. What are some of the good things to do? Well, you could walk after your advisor and say, hey, can I ask a follow-up there? You could email and say, hey, I didn't quite follow your request. I want to make sure I understand it. Send a text message. Ask a coworker. Try to figure it out yourself. Those are all perfectly good things you could do. Is there a policy and procedures manual you can reference? Those are all good ways to handle this difficult situation. What are some bad things to do? Well, you could certainly go bad-mouthing your supervisor. and find all of your colleagues and say, that Dan Baker or that Bev Heron or that this person, the other person. You could quit and say, hey, if somebody treats me like that, I'm out of here. You could start smashing things. You could leave and go home. You could chase your supervisor down and tackle. These are all really bad things to do. And in fact, you could include any type of problem behavior that you see among people whom you support. Now, in order to do the good things instead of the bad things, we all need a wide variety of skills. Number one, we need skills to communicate. And not just skills to communicate, but skills to communicate when we are stressed. We also probably need self-management skills. If you are really stressed and you don't want to address this right now, you can wait a minute. And during that minute, you could walk around a little bit. You could reframe and think, you know, that supervisor just dropped this on me and zoomed off, but I've probably done stuff to people like that too. You could reframe it a little bit. You could also have a little bit of patience. And there are so many people with disabilities and problem behaviors whom I have taught to be patient. What about the skill of problem solving? You need to be able to look at a situation, come up with options, and pick the best one. You need to understand potential consequences. If your supervisor zooms off and you say, hey, and you could do an impression of my Governor Chris Christie right now and use some choice language or say something mean, what's likely to happen to you? Understanding of consequences. These are all skills we need. And when we think about what we put on behavior plans, do we put these kind of things on there? If you are putting these kind of things on there, you're doing a great job in behavior support. And when I say behavior plan, I'm referring to behavior plan with a small lowercase b and a lowercase p. This does not necessarily need to be formal behavioral intervention. These are the skills we teach so that people can manage their lives well, whether or not they've got a behavior plan, whether or not they've got really serious problem behaviors. And by the way, I'm doing a little bit of self-reflection and realizing that as I'm getting excited here, I'm talking really quickly again. And I need to remind myself this webinar is being done for Oregonians, not Jersey people who talk incredibly fast. So go down that list of skills that we all need to manage our lives well. And I challenge every single one of you on this call, put these things in your behavior plans. Put managing frustration, problem solving, brain teasers. How would you handle this? How would you handle that? Relaxation, coping, reframing so that people take a longer-term view on things. You don't need this question answered from your supervisor right now. You can get it answered later. Similarly, you do not need to finish your routine right now. You can do that later. These are all the things that need to be taught. And as soon as we start thinking about behavior intervention differently than we think about our own lives, we've now made the people we support different from us. But guess what? We are all people. We just have different skill sets, different preferences, and different ways of doing things. I don't necessarily have that many routine, repetitive behaviors, unless you talk to my family, and then they'd say I probably do. But we need to think about this the way that we think about our own lives. So as you go through your daily life the next few days, just pay attention to how you handle stressful situations And think about the things that you personally do and include that in your behavior plans. And again, I put that as a small b, the ways you support people generally. Now, who's talking about wellness? Number one, we know that healthcare people are. And I give you the website wellness.com, excuse me, which is where I drew that definition from. And wellness.com has all sorts of really cool stuff that you can do as part of your support for people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, with a focus on healthy body, healthy mind. Who else is talking about wellness? From a mental health point of view, psychologists are. And I refer you over to the website AuthenticHappiness.com, which has incredible stuff on wellness-oriented psychological intervention. And they have some really great resources there. Who else is talking about wellness? I don't know if person-centered planning folks would consider many of their efforts wellness-based, but I absolutely see this wellness-based because, once again, person-centered planning asks us to focus on what's strong rather than what is wrong. And I really, really like that. I think that as we're trying to do a good job of supporting people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, we need to focus on all three of these areas: physical wellness, mental wellness, and also making our planning processes focus on strengths. Now, one of the things that I discovered back when I was an Oregonian is Joanne Cannon gives us a 15-factor scale related to wellness. Joanne Cannon was one of those Peace Corps folks who did 2 stints in the Peace Corps. And when she came back to the United States after that, and she started a master's in public health, and then subsequently a doctorate in public health, she started thinking about the fact that wherever she was in the world, whether in the United States, Europe for travel, Asia or Africa for the Peace Corps, she saw that people who had their lives together kind of had their lives together. And there was something in common across all people. Remember, that's also something I see across people with and without disabilities. So as part of her graduate school research, she got one of the MacArthur Genius Grants, and she studied 600 people in every continent except Antarctica. And she found people who had their lives together. And she did a thorough interview for them about their lives. She did a complicated statistical analysis called a factor analysis that boiled down the results of her interviews into 15 different factors. And they appear on this list in front of you. What I'd like you to do once again, I'm asking us to think about how all of our lives work. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment while I once again hum the theme for Jeopardy. And I want you to look at this list and rate yourself 1 to 3. 1 is low on each of these factors. Then I would like you to rate a person with intellectual or developmental disabilities who you support on each of these factors as well. 1 to 3, 1 is low. And here comes a Jeopardy theme. Okay. who got the lower score? You or a person whom you support? Overwhelmingly, we give ourselves higher scores than people with IDD whom we support. If I were to ask you to only have focused on somebody who also has really significant problem behaviors, you would have probably assuredly scored that person as being far lower than you. Now, when you scored yourself, you may have given yourself a couple really low scores. Did you? I know I did. I gave myself, if I could given myself a -3, I would have given myself a -3 on rest and sleep. I'm a lifelong insomniac. You may have given yourself a low score on coping with stress because maybe you've got a stressful life. I drive in New Jersey daily. I have a lot of stress. I learned to cope with it well, or I wouldn't still be here. Time or space alone. How many of you are parents? Not only referring to a parent of a child or adult child who might have disabilities, but any parent. We don't get much time or space alone. You know, you may have a child who knocks on the door when you're in the bathroom. I just shared too much and I should stop talking. But we may have low scores in one or two of these areas. But you know what? We generally have higher scores in more of them. And if we see that we score low in one of these areas, maybe it's because we choose that. You choose to be a parent. You choose to be married, knowing you'll get less time or space alone. You may have less intellectual stimulation. You're bored, so you start doing crossword puzzles. If any of you like the TV show The Office like I do, I still watch it on Netflix. Remember Stanley was always doing crossword puzzles. That cracked me up. That was so funny. Well, we're all Americans. We probably have low balanced nutrition. I won't even mention that. But we generally have better scores. And if we really, really want to do something about many of these things, we can. You can eat better. But, you know, Twinkies are now being made, so never mind that. Now, this wellness appraisal is copyrighted by Joanne Cannon, so I only have permission to share even these factors with you because I'm also giving you this blurb. The full wellness appraisal entitled What is Right with Your Life is available on inwardboundventures.com. That is her website. And on that, you can order the full appraisal, which includes many questions and a lot of explanation about each of these factors. She doesn't just give the categories. She breaks it down into individual components. Now, how might you use this wellness scale in behavior support? I'll tell you that there are a lot of people I have worked with where there are serious, massive problem behaviors, and I don't know where to start. Of course, you start with doing a functional behavior assessment, but you've got so many problem behaviors that are so complex, they are entrenched, they may have become habits, and you don't know what to start with. You may have to do a whole lot of additional data gathering so you can figure out what to do. You may have to track more stuff down, but the family or the support staff or the teachers, they're ready to call it quits. They say, hey, we can't handle this. Where do you start? You start with wellness, because focusing on the wellness factors, you will almost never make things worse. You'll almost never, I can't say never, but you will almost never make things worse. You, in fact, will generally make stuff better. And starting with some of the wellness interventions may give you enough time to figure more stuff out. Now, with this category, with these wellness-based interventions, you can develop interventions for each of those categories. You don't have to develop one for all of them, but you may start with a couple out of there. And if one of those factors seems really low, start there. That may be where you want to start, but also don't just focus on what's wrong. Focus on what is strong. And you can build off of the higher factors as well. In fact, using many of those. Look back on the prior slide, which you can't do, but now you can. Coping with stress. I would estimate that every single behavior plan I have ever written since the first one I wrote around 1988. You saw my picture on slide 2? Yes, I am that old. Included a major component on coping with stress. I think that stress is such a gigantic issue for all of us, all Americans. Life is going faster, well, at least where I live. Life is more complex. You now need to figure out how to operate a smartphone instead of just a cell phone, instead of just a landline. Life is really complex, and stress is a major issue for all of us. Hence the recent mindfulness movement. By the way, this is May. Mindful in May is our month. The mindfulness movement is a major effort to build awareness in stress management. If it's an issue for the rest of us, I guarantee you it's an issue for people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. And coping with stress is just such a major component. Let's also look at the issue time and space alone. When somebody has problem behaviors, what do? Think about it. We zoom onto that person and we essentially Velcro ourselves to that person's side. In fact, numerous of the physical intervention techniques, numerous of the physical intervention packages and the crisis prevention packages include interventions in which people sort of gather around the individual who's having a really difficult time. Sometimes people do just need a little space alone to chill out. And I have taught so many people with disabilities how to request a little time alone so they can calm themselves. That only works if the other people around them allow that. Remember, all of us sometimes need a little space to ourselves. If there is one of these 15 factors that might cause a little bit of controversy, you can guess which one it is. Spirit awareness. Joanne Cannon does not define that as religion. She defines that as the awareness that there is something bigger than us in the world. There is something supramundane that is beyond the daily reality we see in our lives. And I really like that definition. That definition is a good one for me. Rest and sleep. Back when I was in Oregon, we had a grad student at the University of Oregon who did a really good survey about the presence of insomnia within residential programs in the state of Oregon. And if I remember correctly, 77% of the people who responded to his survey, which was done through the Oregon Rehab Association, reported that they had people in their residential programs who had insomnia. How many of you have insomnia? It's no good. It makes life a lot more difficult when you never feel rested. And I think insomnia is drastically under-considered in our field. So, what might you do with this wellness scale? Well, other than getting the full one from Joanne Cannon at www.inwardboundadventures.com, what might you do? Take this wellness scale and see if there's stuff that is indicated in there that you can use. I have one really neat example I'd like to give about contact with nature. I was working with one program where there were constant fights among people with disabilities who all rode in a van together. And rather than try and get through the van ride in as little time as possible, I encouraged this program to actually stop at this really pretty river and look at the river and look at the nature there. And once people who were on the van got used to doing that and were taught to appreciate all the good stuff going on there, over time, that van ride became one of the best times of the day and was really enjoyed by the individuals who were on that van ride. Again, rather than trying to zoom through it as fast as you could, stopping and enjoying the nature. Now, once that became enjoyed, let's say you're the van driver and you hear that people are starting to get into a squabble behind you. You haven't stopped at the river yet. What do you say? Many of you on this call probably thought to yourselves, I would say, we're not going to stop if you guys don't stop acting out. Sometimes you may use it as a reward, but in this case, no. You're not using it as a reward. You are using the nature stop as a means for improving the enjoyment on the ride. So what you say instead is, hey, I wonder what we're going to see today. Are we going to see a red-tailed hawk? Are we going to see a muskrat? Are we going to see, oops, somebody's passed out over there. What happened? Are they breathing? I live in New Jersey. You got to say that. But contact with nature became awesome. And it was used not as a behavior intervention in a contingent manner, a traditional applied behavior analytic intervention. It was used as a means for improving the entertainment. But here's what we also did. We did use a traditional behavior analytic intervention with it. We introduced a group reward. As soon as everybody finds one cool nature thing on our checklist this week, then everybody gets a reward. Why did we do that? Because we wanted to build cooperation and a sense of team among the people who all were driving together. So we used a blend of a wellness intervention and a more traditional applied behavior analytic intervention. And did it work? Yes, obviously, because I'm still telling this story. So, moving along here, relaxation. We mentioned coping with stress as one of the major factors that really needs to be addressed in the lives of people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. I'd like to give a list here of some of the relaxation interventions I've used. Number one is a breathing meditation. Now, if you want to call this a breathing meditation, or whether you want to call this relaxation, you do how you see fit. You use the term you like most. But when we get people focusing on their breathing, what we see is the person de-escalates and the person also calms down. There's any amount of research that's been done on typical people proving this. So what I'd like now is for everybody to go along with me. Breathe in, breathe out. Slow. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. And I have taught so many people with disabilities to do that. Now, a critical piece for doing any of the relaxation activities is it is not done when somebody is upset. It is initially taught when people are fine. And your overall goal is to raise the general sense of personal wellness, not just to use it as a de-escalation. In fact, what I will do is I will not even introduce it as a de-escalation until somebody has learned the skill of breathing meditation. They're doing it regularly, and I encourage twice a day. If somebody's got a lot of anxiety and a lot of agitation, you do this twice a day, reliably. And you don't introduce it as a de-escalation for a long time, maybe months, because the last thing in the world you want is somebody responding to your cue to do some breathing relaxation by looking at you and saying, "I'm not mad," because that means they really are, or they're about to be mad. But breathing meditation is critical, and also slow. Do not do the breathing meditation which turns into hyperventilation. Breathing meditation or breathing relaxation, some people don't like the term meditation. Breathing relaxation, slow, regular breaths. There are many people who have trouble learning how to breathe slowly. Some folks have used a feather, breathe it in, breathe it out. Some folks have used one of those little whirligigs. I generally have not had to do that. I generally do it via modeling. It might take a while, but with teaching breathing, I will give it quite a while to learn before I resort to using some type of prompt, because when you use the items, they can be hard to get rid of. But again, many of my colleagues use those, and they have great effect of it. There is a tremendous book. It's an academic textbook. I'm not necessarily going to recommend you get it, but Principles of Stress Management, Principles and Practices, they have an entire chapter on teaching slow cycle breathing, and they also have chapters on quite a few other things. You can use it if you like. The neat thing is wellness.com, they have great materials up there too on meditation, and also mindful.org. Now the next one is teaching a visual meditation. This is also one I've done with a huge number of people. And again, typically people who have some type of anxiety. Now the visual meditation, what I would like you to do is think of something, some image, a picture of some place you've been, a picture of some place you would like to be, and I would like you to call that picture up and then close your eyes and imagine it. And once again, I'm going to give you a few seconds to work on it. So you hear paper rattling. That was really just my excuse for looking ahead. What picture did you come up with? What I came up with, you know I'm a former Oregonian, so I came up with Proxy Falls in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains. People often come up with things with water. Maybe you're picturing Cannon Beach. You see that big haystack rock out in front of you. Maybe you're picturing a stream or waves lapping in at your feet. All of us have really beautiful things we can call up, beautiful pictures. Maybe it's just your backyard, if that's what you like. And when we're in stressful moments in our lives, we can do a few moments of breathing meditation. We can do a few moments of calling up that picture and imagining it. We need to give people we support that same ability. A lot of times with people I've worked with who don't have a great imagination, they may not have the cognitive skills to call up their favorite pictures. What I will do is I'll actually find a picture of something that person likes. With one young lady I worked with, it was a cat. Somebody else, it's a picture of the Jersey Shore, Point Pleasant. Somebody else, it can be anything. Santa Claus. And I will have that picture in front of the person, and I will teach them a routine of looking at that picture and looking at all the stuff they love about it. And then I will make a tiny wallet-sized card and give it to that person. And again, this has got to be something that is taught in most cases. I'm going to take out my card, and I'm going to look at it. And I'm going to look at all the things I love on this card. There are a few people I've worked with in my career, typically younger people, where you teach breathing meditation during long walks. As you're walking. And you will use that walk as a de-escalation, a wellness intervention, and it becomes a breathing meditation. Different things work for every single different person in the world. For some people with physical disabilities, doing aquatics, particularly in an accessible warm pool, can be a tremendous resource. Again, different for every single person you may work with. We know that as we are pursuing wellness, there's a degree to which we're flying in the face of our culture that often leads us to unwellness. The media, government, ideals, consumerism, human nature, role models, there are so many different things in our lives that push us away from wellness. And we need to deliberately, for ourselves and for the people we support, push back in the direction of wellness. One of the reasons I love doing wellness intervention is that when we are focusing on relaxation and wellness activities, what happens to the rate of implementation of your support strategies, whether it's behavior plan with capital B, small p, or small b, small p. What happens to implementation? It goes up. Because all of us like focusing on wellness. And over again I've seen that if you are, let's say you're a behavior specialist, and you are worried about implementation of the strategies you've developed, when you focus on wellness stuff, the strategies get implemented because they're enjoyable for everybody. They're straightforward, they're logical, and quite frankly, they work nicely. Let's take a look at this. How many of you work with people who are paranoid? How many of you work with people who feel like other folks are out to get them? Well, guess what? If you read the newspaper, you watch television, you think people are out to get you. And if we have trouble keeping that in context, how about the people we support? Who, if that person does have a level of awareness about things that are currently going on. And by the way, bonus points for you if you recognize this political figure. You can put that in the comments or questions. Who was that? Next up, managing stress. You may look in front of you and see, hey, that license plate, that's New Jersey. Well, guess what it is? That's a regular commute for me on the Garden State Parkway. They call it the Parkway because you're usually in park when you're on it. Life can be very stressful, and we need to teach people we support the long-term view of stuff. You are stuck in traffic now, but guess what? You won't always be stuck in traffic. You're stressed now because you are listening to that person make that sound. Guess what? You won't always be. So we have to teach the long-term view of stuff. How about self-esteem? I know he's no longer on that one TV show. He's on that other TV show. But if you watch this TV show, you get the idea that it's really fun to make fun of people. We know that so many people with intellectual or developmental disabilities are victims of bullying. And that can be trauma with a big T or trauma with a small t. Repeated trauma, repeated lower level trauma, sometimes called complex trauma, is generally nowadays thought of as being every bit as bad, if not worse, than somebody who may have a single, very extreme trauma. Consumerism. If you think of every single thing that our society values, and you compare typical people versus people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, who comes off worse? Number one, physical appearance. I don't know about you, but I don't know too many Hollywood leading men or leading ladies who have physical disabilities. I don't know if there's many celebrities. There's more than there used to be. And by the way, I am an optimist. I think the world's getting better. But you just don't see models with obvious physical disabilities in most cases. How about wealth? Look at this stretch Hummer here. That's a little bit ostentatious, wouldn't you say? People with intellectual disabilities, more or less likely to be wealthy. That answer is simple. More or less likely to have a lot of stuff. That's a straightforward answer. Less likely. More or less likely to be married and have family. And yes, I do believe our society still values family to a certain degree. Less likely. Pretty much everything that our society values is less likely to be seen among people with IDD, which leads us to poor self-esteem. What we need to do is we need to teach people with disabilities to recognize their good qualities, to recognize them at their best, to recognize joy in life. And I've had to work with many people where I get pictures of them doing cool stuff. And I will reflect back to the individual. Look how brave you were when you tried something you hadn't done before. Look how awesome you looked when you were trying to play tennis. Look how great you did when you got on a public bus for the first time. And I've had to work with so many people to help them recognize their uniqueness and their greatness. It is not enough just to say, like I used to do, hey, I think you're awesome. We need to teach people to recognize that they are awesome. And unfortunately, for all of us, not just people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, that is difficult. We also recognize ugliness in the world. Of course, that is the Bayway refinery in North Jersey, made famous on the TV show The Sopranos. It's easy to see all the ugliness in life. It's more beneficial, though, to point out the good stuff. And we also need to recognize the role of being happy with what you have. This is my daughter at age 1.5. She picked out 2 of her favorite stuffed animals that she has. And I took this picture because it was so cute. But look what's on the sign behind her. Target, expect more, pay less. That is telling you that nothing you have is ever good enough. More, more, more. I want more. And we have to teach people we support to recognize what they have and to try to be happy with that. And how do we best do that? By modeling it ourselves. So what does this all mean? It means that mental wellness and recreation are incredibly important parts of our lives. It helps us do more than just use our time well. Remember slide 2 in this webinar. Actually, no, it was slide 6. That's a problem with numbers. There's too many of them. Idle hands are what? The devil's workshop, the devil's work tools. But we don't just try to support people in using their time well. We want to support people in feeling like the things they do are meaningful. I'm working with disability providers and schools across New Jersey right now to teach volunteerism. I think for many people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, people get so used to people doing stuff for them, they don't feel like they give back. So I've been really involved in a major push for volunteerism for people with disabilities in Jersey. Men's corpore and men's sanum. Our goal, healthy mind and healthy body. But it's not just about wellness and recreation. It's also about work. We see Ken Craig in there. His great quote is, "Don't live to work, work to live." We want people to feel like the things they do are beneficial as well. In Jersey, I've done a huge amount of work in supported employment. I'm often asked, what about somebody who doesn't understand money? I agree that there are many people who don't understand money, but everybody understands the feeling of doing something meaningful with their time, doing something meaningful that will make the world better. And that's where, once again, the concept, don't live to work, work to live. I love that picture of Ken Cragen because you can tell exactly what decade that photo was taken in. 1980s. I'm going to leave you with a couple key questions that I want you to be able to answer for people who use support, particularly people with problem behaviors. Number 1, does a person have the skills to negotiate their life? If not, are those skills being taught? Not just supported, but taught. Are the right things being rewarded? Are the wrong things being rewarded? We often, there's such a schism in this field between people who use applied behavior analytic and people who use mental health interventions. My answer is you got to use both. And if you are using some form of consequence motivation, that can be incredibly helpful. Just make sure that the person understands it and can predict it. If not, then it's not going to be very effective. Does the person have the right level of challenge in their life? Do they get to do things that challenge them to the degree that they can handle? I know so many people who have problem behaviors for whom there's just no challenge in their life anymore. People try to protect them from any form of challenge because they worry it won't go well. Well, that person's going to get bored and unmotivated in a heartbeat. Number 5, does the person have a life that matches enough of their preferences? We know that not everybody has a life that matches all their preferences. I would much rather be in Sisters, Oregon right now with nothing to do except for hike, but I have to work. So somebody's got to have a life that matches their preferences to the degree that they would say, yeah, this works for me. Nobody gets everything what they want. Does somebody have the ability to manage stress well? And how about this? Does the person have the ability to understand why things happen? I have a great example of that. I would love to lie and tell you I came up with this one, but in fact I did not. A friend of mine is a behavior specialist who is doing in-home supports for a youngster here in Jersey. And you may know that we have some pretty bad storms, including ice storms, And this kiddo would flip out every time the school bus did not come due to ice storms. 2 winters ago, that happened a lot. My friend realized that this kiddo didn't understand what was going on and got a cookie tray, filled it with ice, put it outside so it froze, got a toy school bus, and showed how on ice the school bus would wipe out. And they did that. They played with it. He played with it. She had him spin it out. And guess what? Once he understood it, there was not another incident of major problem behaviors on mornings when the school bus didn't come. Brilliant. We have to teach why things happen. Does somebody laugh and get entertained enough? I've worked with a lot of people who have some type of acting out, and they get a lot out of it. They get drama, they get control, they have a way to make everybody sort of dance to their tune. That's entertainment. And we need to give people better ways to get drama, excitement, and entertainment. Better than chasing around the staff person with a new eyebrow ring. And finally, does somebody have a competent diagnosis that guides treatment? I'll give you my favorite brain teaser. Can somebody have autism and OCD? The answer is yes. Can you tell them apart? The answer is yes. Can it be extraordinarily difficult? The answer is yes. Often anxiety disorders and depression are really underdiagnosed. And it's critical that we work with psychiatrists and psychologists who get that. And that, to me, is an issue of community development above and beyond just behavior support. Critical stuff that we need there. I have gone for exactly 1 hour. That's the amount of time I have. We now have 13, 14, or 15 minutes for Q&A.
And just a reminder to everybody that your lines are muted, so you will need to type your questions into the chat box.
Okay, so our first question we have is, let's see, it's from Susan, and Dan, she'd like to know, detecting the accurate health issue can be so difficult when supporting persons with significant communication struggles. Any sources available for this detective type work?
It's going to be difficult to ask a question back, so if the issue is how do we tell when somebody's got a medical concern that might be causing them pain, for example. I'm assuming that's what the questioner means. That is incredibly difficult. I would like to refer you over to a book put out by Ann Poindexter. It is published by NAD, the National Association of Dual Diagnosis. In there, she has a tremendous checklist that can be given to a primary care doc of the various health concerns to address. It really is a matter of having a good doc that can answer those questions for you and that will work with you to help do some thorough medical workups. We all know that the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for TR had Axis 3 diagnoses, the health problems that can lead to things that look like a psychiatric diagnosis. The new DSM got rid of it. Big mistake, I think. But really, what I would want to do is work with your primary care doc, get a copy of the checklist in Ann Poindexter's book, and see if you can work on sharing information. We know that there are so many undocumented health diagnoses, health problems that can lead to severe problem behaviors. I know one, a friend of mine is a psychologist who worked with one fella who had some of the most severe self-injury anybody had ever known. He would bang his forehead, on any sharp corner he would find. I met this gentleman, and there was an actual divot, a line in his forehead. My friend finally got him in when he came in inpatient, got him in for a thorough medical workup with a CAT scan, and this guy had a tumor in his sinus cavities that was probably causing him anxiety and misery, absolute misery. The problem was that he'd been doing this for quite a while, and even after the tumor was removed and the docs would say there's no chance he's in further pain from it, he had learned that when he bangs his head or threatens it, people run. And it also acquired significant social communication function as well as just masking the pain in his sinus cavities. So I gave you a really long answer for a very short question. I hope I got that right. But again, it's a matter of working with your primary care doc so that you can establish communication about the things that would cause pain. Thank you very much. I think that's what you meant.
Okay, the next one. So relaxation is a huge need for all humans, including my students, but finding a way to get them to understand deep and or slow breathing has been challenging. What kinds of visual supports would you provide to help those with significant cognitive disability to understand the concepts of slow breathing and meditation?
There is a school of thought on that even if you don't understand what it is that you're trying to do, simply taking the postures associated with relaxation will automatically cause relaxation. That school of thought is behavioral relaxation treatment. There's a researcher from Johns Hopkins named Doja Peklowski, I said that wrong, Peklowski, who has gotten a bunch of good research and done some data gathering to show the effectiveness of it. And what she has people do is they simply assume the relaxed posture. Straight body, legs out straight forward, knees bent at 90 degrees on the ground, hands in the lap, facing up, and just modeling deep breathing. She has said that when she has not been able to get people to do the deep, slow breathing, even just sitting like that and relaxing, with her modeling it in front of them, has gotten the job done. And then she will just continue to encourage deep, slow breathing. What I've generally done is I'm really persistent. I will actually hang in there and keep modeling it and demonstrating it myself. I generally pair my hand goes up when I'm breathing in, my hand goes out when I'm breathing down, when I'm breathing out, and I will just keep saying over and over, breathing in, my hand goes up, breathing out, my hand goes down. And then I'll say, you know, this feels really good. Let's all do this. You can do this too if you want to. However, I've had people where that hasn't been effective, and I just keep cycling through different strategies of relaxation until I find one that works. I am very persistent, and there's one guy I worked with where it probably took me 6 months to find something that worked. You know, try different stuff. Try listening to oldies music. Back in Eugene, Oregon, when I used to live there, it was KODZ, oldies all day, every day, the music of your life. Just keep trying different stuff, because different things work for different people. I think yoga, I have friends who love yoga. I can't do yoga. It bores me to death. I can't, you know, but for me, breathing relaxation works. So just keep trying different stuff. Thank you.
Okay, so we have enough time for about 1 or 2 more questions here. So the next one, I've noticed that shopping is a source of reward or pleasure. How can this be redirected so individuals are actually enjoying other activities that don't focus on getting stuff? Individuals end up having several items of the same stuff, for example, several wallets, DVDs, and purses.
You know what? I'm not so worried about people having multiple different items. How many, you know, and I respect that question. It's a tough one for me. I struggle with it. How many of us have collections? How many of us have more shoes than we need? We all do. The problem is that for some people, especially if you live in an area that's got heavy consumerism, you know, having stuff is big. And I I think that an overemphasis on having stuff leads people to not appreciate what it is that they do have. I'll bring us back to this picture here. And we all have collections, and if somebody wants multiple wallets, that's okay. I collect cool rocks. I would try to encourage people to develop other kind of collections that are a little bit more fun. Collect bird watching. What birds have you seen? You know, you guys live in Oregon where there's awesome jaspers and opals everywhere, you know, on the Rogue River, the Willamette River and such. You know, go look for other cool things. I wouldn't want to try and address the consumerism head on. What I would try to do is develop hobbies other than just shopping. And again, I have no problem with collections per se. I got a closet full of hiking boots, you know, but I would really try and create different things. Let's keep a list of all the cool movies we've seen. Let's, you know, go rock hounding and stuff. Let's find some other new activities beyond just going somewhere and buying things. And again, if I were to say that here in Jersey, I'd probably get people start to throw stuff at me. Thank you very much. Great question.
So that's all the questions that we have currently in our question box, so maybe we can hold on for just another minute and see if anyone else submits questions.
With the person who asked the question about health problems that can lead to problem behavior, if you did have a different question, please re-question it, because I was just guessing at what that was.
She had responded and said that you had basically answered the question, and then Jenny Allison put the link to the book that you were referencing in the answer box as well.
Oh, awesome. What book was it?
Early Detection and Prevention.
Yes, thank you very much. That was it. I couldn't remember the title. I'm such a big fan of Ann Poindexter's work, and also Dr. Ruth Ryan, when she was in Colorado, put together a checklist of different things you could look at too. She published that like 20 years ago, and I do not know if she did a different version of it, an updated version, but it was really terrific. Got 2 more minutes.
All right, so it looks, I know, there's no other questions in the box here. So I think we'll go ahead and end for today.
Well, thank you so much. Let me just jump in and say how much I enjoyed this. You know, I'm such a fan of OTAC, and it's a real pleasure to be asked to do a little bit of work with OTAC and just to continue my connection with the beautiful state of Oregon. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dan. And if any questions come to your mind for Dan Baker, for those of you that participate in OTAC's Behavior Specialist Network on our Moodle site, you can post those questions there for Dan to review with the group. And just a quick reminder that this webinar has been recorded, and we will post it online by the end of this week for you to watch and share with others. And on behalf of the team here at OTAC, thank you and have a great rest of your week. Thanks, everybody.